All right, so when we left off on Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster boy, he had just stood up to his dad, the preacher. And do y'all remember that? He kind of went off on him and he showed a lot of bravery and courage doing that because he had been accused of going down to Malaga Island to see Lizzie again, but he hadn't really. He had gone down to the docks, but he hadn't, and to the shore, but he hadn't gone to see Lizzie because she wasn't there. So he just stood up to his dad, and because his dad said he will not leave that house for 2 weeks. Let's see what happens. It seemed to Turner less and less likely that he would be lighting out for the territories anytime soon. Remember what that means, lighting out for the territories, running away? But as the days went by and he settled into his imprisonment, he was comforted by one thing. Who knew how, but he was more and more sure that Lizzie had not lied to him, and that Malaga was as real as real. And there was one other comfort, and it came from a surprising source. After 3 days of his absence, Mrs. Cobb appeared at the parsonage to ask if he'd been sick. When she found out he wasn't, she asked if Turner might come to her house to play the organ for her. His mother agreed. Turner was not told how Reverend Buckminster came to agree to this too, and he did not ask. He wasn't even allowed to leave the house to go to Mrs. Cobb's and play organ for her, which he didn't like to do. Turner dawdled on his way down to her house each afternoon. Not that there was much to see, but there was the sea breeze, and the trees were starting to turn yellow and blush. So he dawdled until he came to the picket fence, and every day Mrs. Cobb was standing at the door waiting for him, scowling and sour. And she stayed scowling and sour through the first hymn or two, and then she started to hum a little, and eventually, by the Battle Hymn of the Republic, she was singing "Glory, glory, hallelujah," and her voice trembled and then grew stronger. "Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on." And sometime after the "Glory, glory, hallelujahs" were over, Turner glanced at her to assess her general state of health. And if she seemed hale and hearty enough, he meandered into "I have some friends before me gone," and played more loudly than it ought to be played so that Mrs. Hurd could hear it across the street. Do you remember Mrs. Hurd said, "If you ever have a chance, can you play that song for me?" We like Mrs. Hurd, don't we? I don't like this fly. It's buzzing around me. And when he finished each afternoon, Mrs. Cobb leaned back in her chair and smiled, not a scowl anywhere on her face. "I've made it through another day," she said. Remember, she said she was going to die in that chair one day? "No last words yet," Turner agreed. "You're not such a bad sort after all, Turner Buckminster. Well, I'd be pleased to have you be the one to hear them." Uh-oh, that's a big turning point, isn't it? Mrs. Cobb has never liked Turner, and he's never liked her, so this is a big turning point for their relationship. And Turner nodded, strangely glad with the honor, though not so eager to fulfill it, and headed on home. He would wave at Mrs. Hurd, who was sometimes rocking on the porch with her shawl around her shoulders, or sometimes sitting by a window watching for him. And he dawdled as the clouds turned their mackerel undersides to him and the cool of the late afternoon started to settle in over the town. One afternoon, after another dreary Sunday, he walked home from Mrs. Cobb's with the sea breeze determined to shove him to Malaga Island. Is that an example of personification? Can a sea breeze really shove someone? It scooted around him and pulled at his ears. It threw up the dust of the road into his face to turn him around. And when he leaned into it, it suddenly let go and pushed at him from behind, laughing. Lots of personification there. But with the iron word "forbidden" tolling like a heavy bell by his ears. What is that? I hope every one of you said simile. Turner would not let himself be brought to Malaga. And so, with a last abrupt kick, the sea breeze twisted around and left him. Turner watched it rushing pell-mell down Parker Head and toward the shore. "Go find Lizzie," he whispered. And it heard him. That night, after a quiet and still supper, Turner sat by his window, watching the late dusk turn purple. And suddenly there was a sea breeze again, chuckling and rolling down Parker Head, whipping 3 times around First Congregational, and then rollicking across the street, up the clapboards of the parsonage, and to him, rustling his hair and scooting down the back of his shirt so that he shivered and laughed. "Is that you up there, laughing like a loon?" Lizzie Bright. He put his head out the window. "What are you doing here?" he called down. "Well, I've missed you too. I'm stealing chickens." "We don't have any chickens." "Well, your dog then." "We don't have a dog." "I figured you didn't have a dog, or he was as deaf as a post." What's that an example of? Simile. "What does a minister have to steal?" "Books, preaching books." She paused. "Well, I guess you can keep those. I'll try somewhere else." "No, wait a minute, right there." Turner figured that sneaking through a minister's house wasn't exactly something fit for a minister's son. But the scriptures never said, "Thou shalt not sneak." And that was good enough for him. He went down the front steps, hoping his father would be in the back study. He was. And his mother wouldn't be in the front parlor. She wasn't. And so on he went, out the front door that would squeak no matter how much he comforted it. But then he was outside, and the sea breeze found him again and chucked him lightly under the chin. He followed the sea breeze around to the back of the house, and there, away from the light thrown out the study windows, stood Lizzie, one hand on her hip and her foot tapping impatiently. "Why don't you have a dog?" she asked. "Well, we've never had a dog." "Well, that's no reason not to have a dog. If I had a big, fine house like this, I'd have a dog, even a mangy dog. And I'd run him all day, and then we'd come back here and throw balls back and forth till I couldn't throw one more ball." "Well, then I'll get a dog," said Turner, "and we'll see how long it takes that arm of yours to give out." "Longer than it would take yours." "Yeah, probably so." "Oh, you know it's so." She grinned, and Turner grinned back. Lord, it was good to see her. "How'd you know how to find me?" "Well, there's only this one church in Phippsburg, Turner. Doesn't take a whole lot to figure out where you'd be." "You know why I came?" "So I could row you back up the New Meadows." She put her other hand on her hip and stared at him. "Boy, you won't find me in a boat with you rowing any time soon. I came to tell you I just don't believe it." "Well, you just don't believe what?" "What Sheriff Elwell said." "What did he say?" "You always answer with a question, Turner." "Well, what did the sheriff say?" "See? Lizzie, that Willis Hurd dared you to come out to talk to a Negro, that he dared you to come out to the island, that you didn't care a penny's worth about me or my granddaddy, and that you can't hardly wait till we clear out just like all the rest of the town." "That's what the sheriff said?" She glared at him. "Lizzie, I swear to you, as sure as I'm standing right here, that's a lie. Every bit of it. Every single bit." "Yeah, my granddaddy said it was a lie, too." She leaned her head to one side and looked at him steadily. "So, why haven't you been down to the island?" "Oh, so only you get to ask questions now." "Yes." She waited. "I haven't been down to the island because my father believes that you were using me to help you stay on Malaga Island." "Well," she said slowly, "well, I didn't believe it either. The sea breeze lay at their feet, panting, hoping they would play with it again. "My granddaddy's been on that island since he was a baby," said Lizzie, as quiet as the dark. "He won't leave. He'd never leave my grandmama, and he'd never leave my mama." "You won't have to leave," Turner said. "Well, you can't have to leave." "Well, that's what Mr. Tripp says. He's got his shotgun he waves around like Ulysses S. Grant, saying how he'll fight to protect our homes and such. He's about ready to declare independency." They stood together quietly in the dark, in the growing cool of the night, and the sea breeze gave up on them and played in the dark leaves above, and the sound of the waves came in with the quiet. The stars popped in the night sky like distant firecrackers. Simply. And beyond them, the great streak of the Milky Way came down out of heaven and draped a swathe in the ocean beyond. Turner could almost feel the globe sliding under his feet. Lizzie felt it, too, and she reached out and took his hand for a moment, as if for balance, and then dropped it. "My granddaddy said I shouldn't be out here long." "Lizzie, you been clamming?" "Some." "Batting?" "Some." "Flying with the Tripps?" "More than some." "And you?" "Mostly I stay in the house. I go to services, I read, and play the organ for Mrs. Cobb in the afternoons." "You play the organ? You do? Turner Buckminster? You play the organ?" "Better than I bat." "Oh," she said, smiling. "I thought for a minute you might be good." "Come hear me." "Sure." "Please, Miss Cobb, may I come in and sit a while and listen to Turner play your organ?" "Oh, yes, thank you. I'll sit in your best chair." "Of course, I'd love some tea." "No, thank you. No cake just now." "Thank you. Yes, I'm having a lovely time. Mrs. Cobb, he does play like all get out." She being sarcastic there, maybe a little. "Well, it might not be exactly like that. But Lord, I guess it wouldn't." "Well, come anyway." Lizzie looked at him for a long time, tilting her head to one side as if trying to figure him out, which was what she was doing. "You're a strange person. You know that, Turner Buckminster? I wonder if you can see anything straight. What do you think your daddy would say if he saw us two standing out here right now, or knew that I would be coming up to Mrs. Cobb's house just to hear you play?" "He'd say hell and damnation. So, you gonna come?" "I'll come. At high tide, when I can't be clamming anyway." "Well, then I'll see you tomorrow night at high tide, Lizzie Bright." "Yes, you will," she said, and whistling softly, she turned toward the back of the yard. The sea breeze came down from the leaves and followed at her heels, jumping up now and again and frisking all around. Turner snuck back inside as quiet as could be, thinking of high tide.